The rise of Gideon, a reluctant hero. Gideon was an unlikely hero. He came from the smallest clan of Manasseh. He threshed wheat in hiding, fearful of the Midianites. Yet, God chose him. God saw something special in Gideon's humility.
A mighty man of valor? How can this be? I'm weak and inadequate. How can I lead Israel?
God reassured him. He promised to be with Gideon. He would empower him to defeat the Midianites. Gideon, though still hesitant, began to believe. He gathered an army. He reduced his forces from thousands to a mere 300. This was at God's command. He wanted to show that victory came from him, not from human strength.
Armed with trumpets, torches, and empty jars, we prepared for battle. Our hearts pounded with a mixture of fear and anticipation.
The Midianites were a formidable enemy. They outnumbered the Israelites. They had oppressed them for years. Gideon's strategy was unconventional, relying on surprise and divine intervention. The battle was swift and decisive. Gideon's men blew their trumpets, they smashed their jars, they shouted, "For the Lord and for Gideon!" The Midianites panicked. They turned on each other in the confusion. The Israelites, empowered by God, routed their enemies. The Midianite army was shattered.
Why didn't you call us to join the battle earlier, Gideon? We deserve a share of the glory.
My brothers, your strength and bravery are undeniable. Your later arrival allowed you to capture the Midianite princes, Oreb and Zeb.
Gideon's diplomatic response calmed the Ephraimites. Their anger subsided. They felt honored by his words. This incident revealed Gideon's leadership skills. He was not just a warrior, he was also a peacemaker. He knew how to unite the tribes of Israel. Despite the victory, the war was not over. Two Midianite kings, Zebah and Zalmunna, had escaped. Gideon was determined to capture them. He pursued them relentlessly. He was driven by a desire for justice. He wanted to ensure the safety of Israel. He crossed the Jordan River. He continued the chase into the wilderness. Gideon and his men were exhausted and hungry. They came to the town of Sukkoth.
Please, we need food and supplies. Help us capture Zebah and Zalmunna.
Why should we help you? We doubt your ability to capture them.
Next, Gideon reached Peniel. He made the same request. The people of Peniel also refused. They echoed the scorn of Sukkoth.
When I return in victory, I will punish both towns.
Gideon's determination did not waver. He continued his pursuit. He was fueled by anger and a sense of righteous indignation. He would not rest until justice was served. He would not allow the Midianite kings to escape. His pursuit was a testament to his unwavering resolve. He finally caught up with Zebah and Zalmunna. Gideon captured Zebah and Zalmunna near the Jordan River. He had fulfilled his vow. He had avenged the deaths of his brothers, whom the Midianite kings had killed. He returned to Sukkoth and Peniel. He did not forget their refusal to help him. He intended to make good on his promise of punishment.
Bring the elders of Sukkoth. I will punish them as I promised.
He captured the elders of Sukkoth. He took thorns and briars from the wilderness. He tore their flesh as he had promised. He meted out a harsh punishment. It was a stark reminder of the consequences of disloyalty and lack of compassion. The people of Sukkoth learned a painful lesson.
Now to Peniel. Demolish their tower and kill all the men in the city.
Gideon demolished the tower of Peniel. He killed all the men in the city. His actions were severe. They reflected the anger and frustration he had felt during his pursuit. The destruction of Peniel served as a warning to other Israelite towns. Gideon's retribution was swift and brutal. He demonstrated that disloyalty and disrespect would not be tolerated. He established his authority. He ensured that his commands would be obeyed in the future. Gideon brought Zebah and Zalmunna back to his hometown. He confronted them with the deaths of his brothers, demanding justice.
You have taken the lives of my brothers. Now you must acknowledge your crime and pay for your cruelty.
The Midianite kings were defiant. Zebah and Zalmunna boasted about their royal lineage and taunted Gideon.
Do you think you, a mere farmer, can judge us? We are kings by birthright.
They dared him to kill them himself, believing their royal status placed them above him. They underestimated Gideon's resolve and misjudged his sense of justice.
Jether, come here. Execute these men.
Gideon's youngest son, Jether, was present. He was hesitant, young, and inexperienced.
I can't do it, father.
Zebah and Zalmunna mocked him, challenging his courage.
Look at the boy. He doesn't have the guts to kill us.
Gideon, seeing his son's hesitation, stepped forward. He personally executed Zebah and Zalmunna, avenging his brothers' deaths. He fulfilled his promise of retribution, demonstrating his courage and strength. He solidified his position as a leader of Israel. Following the victory, the Israelites offered Gideon kingship. They wanted him to rule over them, recognizing his leadership and strength.
I will not rule over you, nor will my son. The Lord is your king.
Instead of accepting the throne, Gideon requested a different reward.
Give me the gold earrings you took as spoils of war.
The Israelites readily complied, piling up a vast quantity of gold. Gideon collected the gold and fashioned it into an ephod, a priestly garment. He placed it in his hometown, Ophrah. It became an object of veneration, and the Israelites began to worship it, turning away from God and falling into idolatry.
This ephod will remind us of the Lord's victory.
But Gideon's seemingly humble request had unintended consequences. The ephod became a snare for him and for Israel, leading them astray. The ephod became a popular shrine. People from all over Israel came to Ophrah to worship it. They offered sacrifices and sought blessings, forgetting the true God who had delivered them from the Midianites. They were seduced by the allure of the golden image.
This was never my intention. I wanted to honor God, not create an idol.
However, his actions had disastrous consequences. The Israelites' faith became corrupted as they focused on the physical object rather than the spiritual reality. The ephod became a symbol of their spiritual decline, representing their departure from the true worship of God. It marked a turning point in their history, paving the way for future generations to fall into idolatry. The story of the ephod is a cautionary tale. It demonstrates the dangers of misplaced faith and highlights the importance of remaining true to God's commands. Despite the tragedy of the ephod, Gideon's leadership brought a period of peace to Israel. The Midianites were defeated, the land was secure, the people enjoyed prosperity. Gideon lived to a ripe old age. He witnessed the fruits of his victories. He had many wives and 70 sons. He was a respected figure. He was remembered for his courage and leadership. He was hailed as a deliverer of Israel. His name became synonymous with strength and victory. He left a lasting legacy. During his lifetime, the land enjoyed tranquility. The people were free from oppression. They could farm their fields and raise their families without fear. Gideon's leadership had brought stability and security to the nation. His legacy was one of peace and prosperity.
Gideon's final years were a stark contrast to the turmoil of his early life. He had risen from obscurity to become a national hero.
After Gideon's death, the Israelites quickly forgot the lessons they had learned. They abandoned the worship of the true God. They returned to their old ways of idolatry. They worshipped Baal and other false gods. They fell back into the cycle of sin and rebellion. The peace that Gideon had established did not last. The Israelites' spiritual decline led to political and social unrest. They became vulnerable to their enemies. They lost the unity and strength that Gideon had forged. They were once again in danger of being conquered. The story of Israel's relapse after Gideon's death is a sad commentary on human nature. It demonstrates the fragility of faith. It highlights the constant temptation to turn away from God. It shows how easily people can forget the blessings they have received. The cycle of sin and redemption is a recurring theme in the Bible. Gideon was a complex character. He was a man of great faith and courage, yet he also struggled with doubt and insecurity. He was a humble servant of God, yet he also displayed moments of pride and anger. He was a brilliant military strategist, yet he also made mistakes that had lasting consequences. His story is a reminder that even the greatest heroes are flawed human beings. It teaches us that God can use imperfect people to accomplish His purposes. It encourages us to embrace our own imperfections and to trust in God's grace. It shows us that true strength comes from humility and dependence on God. Gideon's life was a tapestry of triumphs and failures. He experienced both the highs of victory and the lows of despair. He learned valuable lessons from both his successes and his mistakes. He grew in faith and wisdom throughout his life. His story is an inspiration to all who seek to follow God.
Gideon's character is a reflection of the human condition.
The story of Gideon offers valuable lessons for us today. It teaches us the importance of humility, courage, and faith. Gideon's initial reluctance to accept God's call reminds us that true strength comes from recognizing our own weakness and relying on God's power. His courage in facing the Midianites with a small band of men inspires us to be bold in our faith, even when we face overwhelming odds. His willingness to obey God's commands, even when they seemed unconventional, challenges us to trust in God's wisdom and guidance. Gideon's story also warns us against the dangers of pride and idolatry. The incident with the Ephraimites and the creation of the ephod demonstrate the devastating consequences of misplaced priorities and misplaced faith. They remind us to keep our focus on God and to avoid the temptations of the world. The epic tale of Gideon is a timeless story of faith, courage, and redemption. It is a story that can inspire us to live lives of humility, courage, and faithfulness to God.